Welcome to Stories of Brisco and Bradshaw. I would be Bradshaw. That would be your Chickasaw native, your Chickasaw Hall of Famer, Mr. Gerald Brisco. And what a treat we got today. He is a catch world champion. He is a no-gi jiu-jitsu world champion. He is the last open weight pancreas, king of pancreas champion, youngest UFC world champion. Basically, he holds every world championship that's ever been made. He is Mr. Josh Barnett. Josh, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here. And, and what do? I take all that and become a worker. So
That's right. You're into the easier stuff now.
Well, that's what Gene LaBelle would say all the time. He's like, what are you doing all this shoot stuff for? Get in the ring and just, go work. It's so much easier. And I just think, what are you talking about, Gene? I don't remember not getting beat up, bumped up, hurt, bruised, and all that kind of stuff working in New Japan. I had to contemplate which was harder on my body,
Shamrock
Josh
said the same thing. He said, it's easier in the UFC because I don't have to get hit.
Yeah. True enough. Yeah. If I want to take you out in a squash, I'll do it. Otherwise, no, we're here. It's raw. Actually, I need you to go 11 minutes tonight. So, okay, I guess.
Josh, you're speaking of getting beat up and all that stuff. I understand, doing a little research on you before the show this week, you're going into your bios and all that stuff. You're growing up and you're a young man that had a few issues in your mind, and a kind of a wrestling coach kind of stepped in and kind of drew you into the sport of wrestling and kind of got you calmed down. Is that correct or what?
Essentially, really, athletics was a great place for me to put all this energy and this vitality into something in a positive light. But it was also a way that I could take some control over like my own life, let's say, and try to control that direction and what I want to do with it, and realize things that I hadn't ever considered before, and a way I could go my own way. And that was really, I think, the strongest part about it, because I guess I wasn't a person built to really fully integrate into the way the world was working at that time. And, I had troubles with that. But once I could find myself in sports, and especially wrestling as an individual sport and as a combat sport, that was like the perfect outlet. And it was, you could use like a cheesy term like self-actualization, but for real, that's where I was really able to develop who I am, most of all. And that's also where I learned where those deepest relationships can be made, where those mentorships could be there, because most of all of human history is people are built on mentorships and keeping that alive and moving down from one to the next. That's one of the kind of the core old school tenets of pro wrestling is you take people under your wing. The idea of the paying your dues wasn't just so some cheeseball promoter these days could just take advantage of you for cheap or for free. In fact, it was like there was a responsibility from those veterans, to bring these new guys in. And if these new guys got it and they could get with the program, well, then you could be a part of this, and we'll work with you and we'll build you up. And if you keep at it, you'll have your own thing at some point. But that's the amount of effort and responsibility that comes with that. There's like kind of an obligation, I saw it, which is, why I take on the athletes, the shooters and the workers that I do. It's the same thing. A lot of people will you teach me? Will you run me? Will you do this? And it's like, well, it's not just that simple. It's about, who you as a person, not just whether or not you can pack the seats and all that, whether you're going to be the hottest worker or shooter that world's ever seen, or you're just going to be wherever you end up, but you're going to be the best version of you. I'm just really more interested in the latter, not the former.
Yeah, it just seems like to me those old wrestling coaches, because my life was full of old wrestling coaches. Seems like they developed into the perfect mentors
Mm-hmm.
for kids like you, and like for me, that it really had no direction. It was kind of out there, kind of shotgun like, and just trying to find the direction. But this coach, even after you even went to college, he played an important role in you kind of evolving into what you became, right?
Well, yeah, and then my coaches always were kind of around the peripheral, even when they were no longer directly involved in exactly my development. I was out in Montana training under Jim Harrison. He's a karate, judo guy, kickboxer, martial artist, one of these, legends of legends from the old bare knuckle karate days, and, a real tough son of a gun. But a wrestling coach came back around and connected me with Matt Hume for my first fight. And, these people still have, been around and supported me in one way or other. And as even I left Jim Harrison, started training under Harushi Manishi and Matt Hume at AMC Pancration. So now I'm at this actual professional fight school geared towards churning out pro MMA fighters, which was a really rarity in 1997. So, or 98. Well, yeah, 97. Jim Harrison was still a part of that process, and he would always check in with me. We'd have conversations, and I think it's not transactional. You don't really work with these coaches, and then it's like, oh, well, you taught me what you needed to know for this period, and then I move on, and then that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, that's, people aren't transactional. And I do got to bring this up, totally unrelated, but John, we got the same initials. Hey, we're just rotated. Instead of JBL, I'm JLB.
That's great.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah.
That's I don't know how they trademarked it, because the JBL the speaker, everything.
Right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the best thing about it was, when I came in, Vince gave me the name Justin. I was Justin Bradshaw, and I'd been John Hawk, but guys didn't last very long in the WWE at the time. So I wanted to be named Justin Hawk so that I could leave and probably wrestle in Japan or something, because heels didn't last 2 or 3 years. That the business changed, and then guys lasted long term. So he goes, I'll just give you the name Justin Hawk Bradshaw. And so now all my autographs are now Justin Hawk Bradshaw. Well, now it's just JBL. It's the greatest thing ever.
Oh, what a thing he did for you there with that JBL. That's the easiest signature you can whip off. When you've got a bunch of 8x10s and all this, it's like, it's no big deal. I started seeing how people that did it on the regular started signing things. I'm like, man, I don't want to put nicknames and all this stuff in there. I'll be here all day. My hand gets cramped up. You're gonna put me over with just a simple signature. That works for me. Oh yeah. And by the way, if those speakers ever wanted to have a word with them, just see if they could take a lariat, and whoever wins, right?
That's exactly right. I learned that over several weeks in Japan. You know how that is being over there. You tend to learn something enough to survive. Not that it survive as far as get a finish that people will believe in.
Yeah, well, it's about intention, right? If you hit things like you really mean it, it could be a lariat, it could be a punch, it could be really anything. It could be the biggest or the smallest, but they'll buy it because you buy it. You're telling them that it means it to you. You could do every cool move you've ever thought of, but if you don't have that intensity behind it, if you don't have that, like, you're not doing it like you mean it, then they don't believe it either.
Right. Well, Josh, you just made a comment that's so important to not only our business, but to any business out there. You got to do stuff like you really mean it. And in our business, where 99 and 9/10 people know it's a work out there. But if you're doing something, and like on John's lariat, even though people knew it was a work out there, they knew that they didn't want to be hit by that damn thing. Because of, number one, the intensity that John put in the effort of putting that thing out there. And so what a statement that was.
Yeah, Booker T killed me on the lariat. He told me a few years ago, he did an interview. He goes, "Oh, he never touched me with it." I said, "Booker, you just killed my finish."
Well, I mean, some of that has to go to your opponent too, and the guy 100%. You're working. If he's really good at bumping, you might not ever touch him. And right. but they'll put it over like you killed him, and that's of course that's the best case scenario. But if that worker, if their skill level is maybe not where it needs to be, then we're just giving them a little helping nudge. You know what I mean? It's just a little help in the right direction. And the comment that I made, that that intention, that's how Inoki was training me. That was the thing that he stressed over everything else. And and he would talk about, if he's wrestling Andre the Giant, he's going to take into all these considerations the way he's built, how his moves and all this stuff, and how he would create a strategy to approach him. So it was never just, walk 90 degrees and lock up. Like, why am I going to lock up with Andre the Giant? He's going to kill me. He's enormous. But, he was always going back to you. Your eyes got to show it. You know, it has to be. It's the intensity and the emotion and the sincerity, like the belief in what you're doing. That's the number one. And I remember the first time I met Stone Cold. We're at World's Gym in Santa Monica. No, not in the Venice kind of area around in LA. And I don't know if you'd ever been there. You guys ever go be in town and go hit that place up to go work out? But I see him there and I'm like, holy shit, that's Stone Cold. What the hell? So I kind of walk up to him after my workout and I said, hey, nice to meet you. My name is, I know who you are. I'm like, whoa, okay. I'm getting recognized. That's cool. You know, I'm going to pop for that. And we're talking, working and stuff. And he goes, you know what? Jake Roberts told me, think, shoot, but work. And I go, that's the easiest way to put it out there. Everything's a shoot, but you're working. And, you know, that's easy to say, harder to do, but it's important. And like you're saying, I don't care if people know it's a work. Yeah. If we can, if we're really capable of it, the best that are out there, they'll make you doubt maybe the whole match or pieces of it. Oh, I think JBL might have had, maybe he got stiffed and so he gave him I don't know, maybe he got mad. Maybe it was the more they're talking, the more they're trying to speculate on what happened, the more you know you got them hooked, and the better it is for them too, man. Because then they
want to believe. They want to believe. Yeah, and some of our guys give them every reason not to believe. You know. True. And the great one, Johnny Valentine said, you know, I can't control what you think about the first three matches. I can control what you think about my match. And when you watch my match, you're going to think I'm for real out there. And that was Johnny Valentine's entire philosophy in the business. And Johnny was so successful. But you mentioned Antonio Inoki. Mm-hmm. I had the privilege of being in the ring with him on several occasions.
Yes.
On that Japanese tours and everything. His intensity in the ring as a worker was off the charts high. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but when I get involved with NXT, our training facility over in Orlando there, and on the lockup, you know, everybody, you know, just dancing to the lockup. You don't do that. There's a video of my brother Jack and Oki tying up. It's the most violent looking tie up you'll ever see in your life, and I recommend any young guy out there to just pull that Jack Brisco, Antonio Inoki lockup. If that'll convince you right there that you'll lose your judgment on whether it's real or not.
Well, yeah, and it's also treating something like locking up as this isn't just this isn't throwaway nonsense. This is just where I start. I haven't done a move yet or whatever. It's like, stop thinking about moves. Yeah. This lockup sets the tone for everything. Not to mention, it's telling people whether or not you even care on that connection. Because the idea is, if I'm locked up with you, you can do something to me. I can do something to you. I have no idea what that could be. I could get arm locked, knocked out, thrown on my back and pinned. This whole match could end from that one lockup, and you should treat it as that. And I teach a lot of guys, and it's so funny how sometimes they're just like, I never thought of that. Someone tries to lock up with me and I won't let them do it. I just keep breaking it off and breaking it up. No, I want to lock up the way I want to, because if I let you get ties, well, you're going to grab me the way that works best for you. So just keep breaking it up, and then eventually getting that lockup, and then you're pummeling and you're working. Maybe you're removing the hand, you're playing around a little bit, you're trying to jockey for position, and then maybe you go into something. But or maybe you don't right away, because I mean, how many wrestling matches you see a guy just step up, you know, get on the mat, make contact, and immediately they're just doing stuff. I mean, no, you want to find your opening. You know, if I'm JBL, I want to hit this big lariat. Well, I don't want you to tie up with me like that. And in fact, if you tie up, I might pass that arm drag you, send you off another direction so that I can get some distance and crack you in the face. Because if I could do that right away, well, I get out of here easy, hit catering, and I'm done.
Right. And you've seen it because you did a lot of commentary. You've seen it as well as I have, doing a bunch of commentary for so long and so watching so many matches. You get those guys there like a Johnny Valentine, and all of a sudden they lock up in some big stiff fashion, and literally the people notice the difference right away. Mm-hmm. They may not be able to articulate what it is, but right away you can feel the difference in the arena that, okay, this match is something to watch.
Well, and isn't that when we're commentating, isn't that our job? they don't need to articulate. We'll articulate it for them. You know, we're not just there to describe what's happening. We want them to understand from our descriptions the technical aspects of the wrestling, but we want to guide them in a way to approach the match too. We want to elevate everything that's going on out there and use us being the guys who know, you know, front to back, sideways, everything about wrestling, to then use that knowledge to help craft that match in the best way we can to protect the guys in the ring, to make them seem as strong as possible, and to get the marks, the fans to really to get the best experience out of it so they can bite down on it and really appreciate what's going on.
I was doing some historic shows recently, and one of them was on on Hogan and Savage. And, you know, it was a really well put together storyline of, you know, the jealousy over Miss Elizabeth. Did Hogan grab her? Did he not grab her? Was he protecting her? Or did he go overboard? People understand that. Well, Savage was, you know, cutting a very colorful promos about, I see the jealousy in your eyes, all this stuff. The guy telling the story was Gorilla Monsoon, because Hogan wasn't saying anything. And that's what people that were the television people brought up, was the one who was able to make the story was Gorilla Monsoon, because he was the one able to articulate Hogan's story. But Hogan didn't do anything wrong. Hogan did this. You know, the commentary, if done right, so greatly can enhance the whole storyline and the whole match.
Oh, very much so. Commentary can make or break something. And I think people get the wrong idea about what commentary is supposed to be, and it ain't easy. It is mentally exhausting. Sometimes you think you're going to be on and you can't find the speed or the eloquation to deliver your best. But at the end of the day, man, we're there as commentators to not necessarily to paint the picture itself, but to help make it as vibrant and as understandable as possible, and to give someone a setting for why they're looking at this and what it means. Yeah, I love doing commentary, but I'm not going to say it's not hard. I don't care how many matches I've done. I don't care how good a job I may have been considered at any point. It's tough, and it's yeah.
But you have a huge advantage of the fact that you've had so much history in combat sports, in every type of discipline of combat sports, and been very successful at it. So people trust your knowledge in it. You know, a lot of young commentators that don't have that, it's tough on them. But, you know, and I tried to tell them, said, you know, instead of you say, well, somebody said, or quote somebody saying, you have that advantage of being able to refer to that and say, well, I saw this with the judo throws. I saw this with catch. You're able to bring in so many things from that bag of knowledge that so many people can't. That's an advantage that you can't teach.
No, and it's true. And it's also another good reason why if people are able to, you know, craft any promotions or organizations in such a way to really think about why the old ways were the old ways, and why were they the old ways for so long. And that is the commentator needs to know how to wrestle. Like the referees everybody needs to understand what's going on in there, so then they can take their part of that and deliver it in the way that they need to the audience that's out there watching it. And I have a great advantage with all the time I've spent fighting, training, developing, learning all these things. And then at the same time, you know, I'm sitting down with, be it JR, Morrow, whoever, I'm letting them teach me along the way as we're going, picking up on things, that how they deliver, how they ping pong back with me, how they set me up for stuff, when they lay out, and then talking to them in these gaps and just trying to, you know, it's not even a matter of like how good or whatever you want to compare one against the other about any commentator. It's about knowing that these commentators are themselves. They have their own style. They have their own approach. They have their own vision towards what they see. Figure that out. Maybe there's something in there that one guy's got that another doesn't have, and it's not better or worse. It just resonates and works for what you do. And you know, find that way to be better about giving that information to the audience and helping them digest it. And, you know, it's funny you mentioned about the experience side of things. This is what I say to shooters when they go into working. Don't go into working as a shooter. If they know you're a shooter, they already know you're legit. You don't got to get them to believe when you do a punch or you hit an elbow or you slam someone or take them down or put a submission. They already believe everything you do. You go out there and try to pro wrestle in a very like hyperbolic kind of stereotypical way, what you might think it is, it ruins everything you're trying to do, because now you're out there running around hitting rope. Like, I thought this guy's a shooter. Why is he doing it like this? And then they end up, because if they're shooting and they throw a kick, well, they got confident. They're shooting and they hit a double leg, hit a half and turn them over and stack them up. They believe that. They know that in their heart as the worker. But if they're out there and they've never really thrown drop kicks and they're out there trying to, do the international and then hit it, all this different stuff, you're like, okay, but like, you don't believe it. So why are they going to believe it?
Right.
Judge, I agree with you 100%. On the shooters, I run into so many of them that they're shooters and they know what we're doing is a work out there, and so they go out and they try to make it a work themselves instead of trying to have the intensity of trying to make people believe that it's not. If you go in as a shooter knowing it's a business, you got to step up on all the other shooters that don't think it's a business, because once you realize what we're trying to do, which is draw money and draw crowds, then you got to step up on all these guys. Well, I'm a shooter. I could take this guy down. Sure, you can take him down anytime you want. But what's it accomplish? What kind of money are you going to make off of that? So, once you realize it's a business and nothing out there, what you do out there doesn't really matter how you look or what the outcome is. I think that was one of my brother's main advantages that he always had. He realized right from the very get-go that it's a business. I'm out there. I know what I can do to these guys if I want to, but I don't want to. I want to make some money. And once you get that in your mind, then you're on an entirely different path than 70% of these shooters that go out and they'll come into our business.
Yeah, you can try to smarten a guy up. I mean, that's our job. If we're the vets, we're supposed to smarten people up. But it's for their own benefit. But you can't make them understand what you're giving them. You can't make them smart. You can only offer them the opportunity. And to that, think about what wrestling used to be like when you guys were getting in. Everybody either was a shooter of some sort, and that didn't mean necessarily just like, oh, they were all an amateur wrestler or they were already a boxer. Or there were also guys who came in, like let's say the Warriors. They weren't shooters and like, classically trained in some sort of particular combat sport. There were dudes that got into street fights and fought people in the doors and all this kind of stuff.
That's a shooter.
Or Dick Slater. Like, no. That guy, I don't care it doesn't matter what certificates are hanging on the wall. You don't want to fight that dude. I'm telling you, because he's for real.
Yeah. And it was up here at those type of guys too.
Yeah. And when you're watching these guys in the ring, everybody knows that this guy isn't to be messed with. Everybody in that ring is a shooter of some sort. And, it all responds the same.
And that's such great advice you give the guys about don't be throwing drop kicks and things that are pro wrestling type moves if you can't do it well, because there are guys out there that can do it very well. And if you're a shooter, especially if you're on some like national level, or in your case a world champion, there's no reason to try to compete with guys in pro wrestling moves. You're different, and if you're trying to be all the same, that doesn't draw money. Be what is true to you. And create something different in that ring. And all of a sudden now people, when they see you, they go, that's an attraction. That's somebody I want to watch.
Look, you're preaching right now. I mean, that is the holy gospel of professional wrestling right there. And it's the same conversation I had to have with Shayna Baszler early on, because I've got her working these indies early in her career. And hell, that just came from a conversation. I knew she was kind of winding down with the shooting. And I said, well, look, I know you're really into pro wrestling and you've really been getting more involved and you really like watching it. And this is a thing that's really passionate to you. You want to start working? And she's like, yeah, I'd like to do that. I go, okay, well then we're going to keep training generally as normal, but now I'm going to start adding all these workouts around working, and we're going to start developing you as a worker as well as a shooter. And we're going to blend these things two together. But when she gets into the market, she starts having these promoters tell her to wear MMA gloves to the ring and do all this stuff. And I'm like, well, okay, but everybody already knows you're a shooter. You don't have to wear gloves and you don't have to do this. You don't have to. They already know that. If you're wearing those gloves and you're not punching people in the face and knocking them out, which, look, if you're going to do that out there when your matches, you can. that's takes a lot more effort to learn how to do that. It's a little trickier, and let alone, man, I don't know if these girls are going to want you socking them in the face, but if you're hitting them and they ain't going down, well, it just makes you look bad. And you don't have to try and get people to believe what you do. You grab that girl's wrist, it has way more impact when you do it than when a lot of these other girls do, because these other gals who aren't known as shooters, who they don't already have that background that people know about to believe, they're trying to get you to believe that. Practically the main thing that these wrestlers, when they're starting out, trying to do is get you in the audience to believe that what they do matters. You don't have that problem. And it took her a little bit, and then eventually she's like, I get it. I get it. And I was like, no, it's tough, because you're going to feel like you're the one heretic everywhere around all these people in this locker room right now. And they're all telling you, and everybody's wrestling the same way and doing all this. Like, no, I'm telling you, Shayna, it's not even their fault. Like, who's training a lot of these people these days? It's just things have been lost and along the way, and it's okay. But it's part of our job to try and bring that back. It's not against them. It's not to be diminishing. It's just that if they don't understand how they can get a lot more out of a lot less, then it's not their fault. But let's try and do our best to lead by example.
Josh, that's important, because when we first brought Brock Lesnar and Sheldon Benjamin, they came in at basically at the same time. Both of them fantastic shooters, both of them fantastic amateur wrestlers. Brock a national champion, Sheldon Division II and Junior College national champion. So they had the deal. They had all the pedigree behind them. When Brock came in and Sheldon came in, we allowed Sheldon to do a little bit more pro style, because he was such a more versatile athlete. Not taking anything away from Brock, because he's a great athlete, but Sheldon had that agility and that ability, where Brock was the big monster guys. When Brock first come in, we just had him doing run-ins on guys. We'd run in a double-legged guy and just take him up and slam him. Simple double leg, or do a farmer's carry and over to and develop into a F5 finish there. But just those impressionist moves that we had Brock doing, all of a sudden our audience is looking, holy cow, this guy is unbeatable. Or we'd have Sheldon coming in where he could do a picture-perfect drop kick, where Brock couldn't do that. So they were entirely two different training methods, but Brock was the power guy. So you're right, they don't have to come in and make it a professional wrestling match in the beginning until they get used to it.
Yeah, and a match is a match. A match is two guys going at it, let's say, seeing who can better the other. And they're trying to win by pin, submission, or maybe knockout, although that doesn't usually get used very often, but it's within the rules, which people still forget there are rules. Right. Biggest culprit of that is the referees. It's like the referees, man, doesn't matter where I work. They come up to me and they're like, okay, what are we doing? I go, someone will tap out, or someone will be knocked out or pinned. Okay. How long? I'll give them a time roughly, and then I go, well, I'll see you out there. Like, I don't have a match to give you, because I don't want to make one. I just want to go out there and work. And so I'm not going to give you this entire choreography because it don't exist. If I got a guy that I can work that with, I'm going to call it in the ring. We'll have a kind of an idea about the feeling we want the match to have, but that's it. We're just going to tell a story, go out there, work a match, and trust one of us is going to be pinned or submitted or knocked out or whatever, and you'll know it, because as you're counting them, they won't get up. Their shoulders will stay down, or they'll tap. It'll be completely abundant. It'll be so simple. But do me a favor, you treat this as a shoot, and if one of us don't get our shoulders up, we lost. If we don't let go of that rope on 4, DQ us. Don't break the rules. Don't fudge refereeing because you think that the result has to be some particular way. No, that's our job. We'll take care of it. If you break that, you break all the kayfabe of the match. You show that it's really not about what's happening in the ring. It's only about getting to a particular finish, and that does a disservice to the whole thing.
Yeah, sure. Josh, tell us a little bit about your transition when you transitioned from football player. Where was it? Montana or somewhere like
No,
that?
I was playing football in high school, and I really wanted to play college football or college wrestling. I had an offer from Oklahoma to come down, and they're like, "Well, we don't have any scholarships at the moment, but if you come and you wrestle for us, I'm pretty sure we can get you one." And the wrestling programs are far less funded than pretty much anything else in college. Even though it's probably the cheapest sport to run, and you can run it for both men and women if you want. But that's doesn't seem to really make a factor in terms of how some of these athletic directors are looking at it. But I'm just like, man, I don't know. Go to Oklahoma. I just didn't really know what I was doing. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll play football for University of Montana. And I had offers to do track and field. I had offers to play football for Cornell and University of Chicago and some of these other places. Cornell and Chicago, I was like, oh my God, I may have qualified to get into this school on grades, but can I actually keep up? I mean, these schools are full of some real smart cookies, and Cornell's Ivy League. I'm not sure, but I ended up at Montana, and then I just was like, you know what, forget football. I just want to be a fighter at the end of the day, anyways. This was going to be my ultimate goal. This, in my mind, was the thing I could do. It was the greatest athletic endeavor that I could compete in. Everything else.
Was UFC really gaining traction at that time, or were they still in their infancy?
I mean, this was around 1996, so this is probably like UFC 15, maybe something like that. And I've been watching it since just about the very beginning, at least since UFC 2, which is what I saw on a tape, which it showed me that there was, holy crap, this is something you could do. And gave me that inspiration, and that set that seed in my mind. Like, there ain't nothing in the world that I could do that would be a greater athletic competition than this, man. It's not, I'm not hitting a ball with somebody. I don't have a whole team behind me. I'm not trying to beat a time. I can literally go out there and do everything I can to ruin this guy's ability to perform, and vice versa. If you're just thinking about competing in a game, but ultimately, no, I get to fight. And to me, it was all sports were just kind of a watered down version of war of some sort. And to me, this was getting closest to it. And I thought that's where I belong. This is what is most in my heart, and this is what I belong to do. This is what I'm made for. And it turns out I was somewhat right, I guess, and
somewhat
kept going. And then I was always a huge pro wrestling fan too, so there was always this feeling about professional wrestling around what I was doing. And then when I got the chance to actually become a worker, I leapt at it. I didn't entirely know what it was going to take, but I just figured I could make it happen.
How did that come about?
Well, strangely enough, and I think I must have mentioned this before a few places, but I don't ever see it mentioned, so I'll mention it again on your podcast here, and you can people can say this is an exclusive. But first time I was offered a match was against Shinya Hashimoto in Japan, but this was like the original Wrestle One, I think, or something. It wasn't 0-1, I believe, but it was the big put together match, and I was in the UFC at the time, and Joe Silva, I had to hit him up, the matchmaker, go, hey man, I got this offer for Hashimoto. What do you think? And they're like, well, we don't want you going out there and jobbing to this guy. And I go, it's Hashimoto. And so in all respects, like, I should job to him. But the only reason I also agree with you, and I thought of it like this, nobody thinks I'm going to beat Hashimoto. Right? Like, so me just going out there and jobbing to him is just another guy. And Hashimoto was on this huge winning streak. Like, everybody was jobbing to him. So I'm like, it doesn't really, I don't know that it's really even going to move the needle that much. Even though, I mean, the company said, hey, nah, we don't want you to do it. But even then in my head, I'm like, Hashimoto is amazing. He's a legend. But at that time, it didn't have any, the matches you want are the ones where the people are like, I don't know who's going to win.
Right.
They want it to believe, like, other than like, oh, I just know this is going to be a match, and at some point Hashimoto will hit his finish and it'll be over. Doesn't have the same kind of impact. And after that, it wasn't as if I still wanted to find a way into it. I just really wasn't sure. And I saw an old training partner of mine, Tsuyoshi Kosaka, TK, who is a a rings guy, and then he was fighting in the UFC and MMA. I saw he was doing these matches for New Japan. They were doing this, reviving this NWF belt and all this. And I reach out to TK and I go, hey, man, can you get me a conversation with New Japan Pro Wrestling? I want to do this. I would love to be in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And he goes, okay, yeah, I'll tell him that you want it, you're interested. And all of a sudden, New Japan's writing me back. They're like, hey, come down to the Inoki Dojo in Santa Monica, come do that, blah, 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 blah. And I meet Yuji Nagata. We move around a little bit. We train. I meet with their office guys, and they hand me a contract. They're like, no, we're serious. We'll bring you in. This contract is contingent, so if we'll bring you in for this match and we'll give you a tour, but if things don't work out, this is your downside. This is the minimum. But if it's good, it could go to this. I said, fair enough. And that first match is here. Come in and work Nagata at the Tokyo Dome, like for the IWGP Heavyweight title in front of, I don't know, 50,000 people. It's like, yeah, I'll sure. And I get there. Me and Nagata work out for like a couple days in a row. That's it. Like we did have to construct the match because, man, I couldn't go out there and just work like that. I didn't have that kind of experience, but I was already thinking about storylines and things. And like, well, that Crow Cop fight had happened not that long ago. Well, I want to come out and I want to start this match off and move around a little bit. And I want to hit a switch left high kick on you and drop you. But I want you to actually beat the count this time. And then you come back. And so I'm already thinking about what may be in people's heads in terms of Nagata and MMA. I want to find, whether how effective it was or not, a way to like have him overcome a difficulty in his own past and then overcome it and go past it. And thinking about, well, how do I interact with Nagata in this match? It shows me, but also elevates him. And I just went out there, we did our thing. And then they brought me on tour, teamed me up with Perry Saturn to help show me the ropes. And, first match on tour, tag match. I'm going over on Tenzan and Chono. And I'm like, whoa, this is nuts. This is absolutely nuts. First guy I ever wrestled with Vaseline on was Chono. That was a new one. I lock up with him. We do a little bit. I tag out and I go over to the ropes and I wipe my hand down the ropes to try and get all the Vaseline off. First time I ever took a Yakuza kick, and the first one hits me with this big old boot in the top of the chest, and I'm just like, good God, that is awful. And the next one, and they're just like, yeah, turn head. So whack, like, oh, my back. And then he puts me in an STF, which I'm supposed to get a rope break on. I'm all, yeah, sure, that's fine. And in the match, Chono, 6'5", whatever, 6'4", 240 pounds. He's got that STF in it. He ain't trying to stretch me, but now I'm trying to drag all of us. I'm 250. He's 240. And I'm just like, oh, we're stuck on this canvas. Now I wish I had that Vaseline to grease my way over to that, because it felt like that rope was miles away. Like I was never going to get there. I'm just like, just trying to get over to that thing. And it was a great experience. But then the chance to learn to really work was all that time on the road. Okay, from match to match. All these guys are there. And I tell these workers, like, okay, a lot of these guys I'll work with will run in New Japan, and they'll be on these tours with Minoru Suzuki, amazing catch wrestling legend and a former openweight king of Pancrase, and Gotch trained and Inoki trained. He's the real deal. I tell these kids, go talk to him. Go ask him to show you stuff. These guys are more than willing, if you approach them the right way, to help you out. And the reason I was able to learn any of the great things that I learned is not just because I had people like Inoki and Billy Robinson, and even being able to work with Carl some. It was being there every day with Perry Saturn. Then Mike Barton wants to work with me, and then Christopher Daniels is showing me something, and then Chono sees me trying to figure out how to run ropes. So he comes in, he gives me the breakdown on that. And Liger's like, oh, look, man, your selling's all right, but we need to work on how to keep your head up and do this. And Nagata's in there. And all these people are willing because I show up, I say, look, man, all that shooting stuff is great, but just teach me, as if I don't know anything. Like, I'm here to learn from you, your way, your style. And hell, the way I shoot a guy off the ropes, which I can and I do sometimes. Perry Saturn taught me how to do that, and I just learned. And from all these guys who, in my mind, especially back then, are way better than me, way more experienced, and I just gonna soak it in.
Talk about baptism by fire, though. I mean, you had this incredible history outside of wrestling, but that is, you were thrown in the deep water.
Yeah, that's a fact, and I knew it at the time, but I didn't really focus on it. I just focused on, look, I didn't know what it was going to take to be a UFC champion, and I found a way to make it happen. I trusted in myself, and I stayed to the path, and I made my alterations where need be, and I went after it. Why can't I do this? You know, at least when it comes to like moves are moves. Moves are the easiest thing to learn in wrestling. That is so simple. It's not even funny. I was telling a kid I'm breaking in right now, who's a shooter. He's got a collegiate wrestling background, good sized kid. I just took him over to England for the Catch Wrestling World Championships. He won that over there. He's got a good upside to him, but I'm just like, look, man, moves are easy. And most of these like tryout things aren't really to teach you moves so much. Do you have two left feet, or do you actually have some agility? Do you have some coordination? Can you take instruction? If I tell you got to alter that, okay, now when you jump up, I want you to turn when you jump. Can you do at least that much? Did you show up in shape, or do you not take this seriously? Right? You know, it's like they're not really in there to try and teach you how to bump and roll so much. They're trying to actually see, does this guy actually care? Is he going to take this seriously? And is he even capable of being taught? Does he have at least a minimum level of athleticism? He can move this son of a bitch around the ring.
Yeah. You mentioned overcoming different stuff in the UFC. You had Couture in that big fight for the championship, but you also, before that, you had a 6'10" and a 7-foot guy. You're a tall guy. That's huge, though.
I know.
How was that different training for a guy that is 7 foot tall?
Well, you ever remember being a kid and getting the crap kicked out of you by like your uncle, your dad, or something playing around? Yeah, it felt like that. Like I'm 4 years old again. I'm just like, can I have a cookie or what? You know, you got to make your adaptations. And the thing is, like, how do you train for that? And one of the things we did do was we had these like foam bats, square, and they're these martial arts tools that they'll sell for like the Taekwondo classes and different stuff for kids to play with. And well, we had one guy with those, and he's using them to simulate the extra reach. And it's not perfect, but it's an idea of thinking like, okay, when normally where you would think that you're out of distance, you're not right now. And this guy loves his front kick, and he's built almost all legs. So he might seem a certain distance from you, but that leg of his, especially when he puts his hip into it, now he's going to give it another 6-7 inches worth of distance. That foot is probably, 15, 17, who knows? All of that is going to factor in on how far he's going to be able to reach out and touch you with that foot. So you got to make those adjustments. You got to be on your toes. You got to have your eyes up, and you got to be looking at the small things, watching his hip movement, watching where he's looking, watching his shoulders before you can really fully know where you need to be and what that next, movement's going to be. But, I also tell all the kids that are workers or want to work, I go, yeah, you should do some kickboxing, some boxing, whatever. Because when you're in that ring working with somebody, nothing changed. If you really want to be a good worker, you need to be able to look at a guy's shoulder and know what's coming next. You be able to look at his feet and how they're set up will tell you what's available and what he's going to go for, and how to know when he grabs you, when he does this, when he's moving in this direction, what are you set up for? And if I know that also makes you better at selling it. If I want to make your lariat look the biggest and baddest, I need to understand what it's like and what the distance is so that I can best appropriately sell for it.
Was your game plan to go in there and just take what he gave you with the two big guys, or did you have a certain game plan thinking I can catch him in this submission?
Well, between those two, the 6'10" guy was an All-American wrestler, and he was 312 pounds. So for him, it was to try and keep it on the feet. But he got me on bottom. And I thought, well, I'll use my scissor on bottom, my guard, to try and manipulate him here and keep. But it was like being attacked by an iceberg, big, white, and slow. And he just moved his way through and got on top into that saddle position.
That's the first I've ever heard that. That is excellent.
Oh man! And now he's trying to kill me. He's saddled on top of me, and I'm just dodging and hand fighting and blocking. Like, good God, this first round is tough. Then come out in the second round, I hit him with one liver shot, and we're fighting, and he gets me back to the floor. But now I'm going to my submission stuff, and I'm just basically with that fight against Gan McGee, it was start getting him working behind me. And now once he starts working behind me, if he falls behind far enough, that's it. I'm dictating, and I'm pushing him into his own doom. With Semi Schilt being this killer striker, with him it was get him off his feet. Make sure that and don't be in his guard either, because he's got 7 foot tall legs. So I don't want to have to deal with that so much. So do my best, try and navigate that and settle into his chest and his upper body and try to isolate one of those arms. That match had to go a lot quicker than I had intended, because I got that takedown early on, caught a kick, off balanced him, came through on a single, and he fell to his butt. I immediately get on top. I'm in great position, put my knee on his belly. I have his arm gift wrapped around his neck, like would have been the perfect photo op if I was, giving him a couple rights. But he managed to score him out of that. And I imagine as a 7 foot tall guy can. So I drop into that side control, and as I did so, he just flipped a little elbow, caught me in the side of the eyebrow, and it opened up. And now I don't know how bad it is, but it is bleeding pretty seriously. And I'm just going, oh crap. The last thing I need is for this fight to get stopped in between rounds, or maybe even while this fight's going. I don't, that would be an awful way to lose this match, especially when I feel like it's all going my way. So then I just had to hustle. I'm dropping elbows and punches. I'm really picking the pace up. I get mounted on him. I'm cracking him. I'm busting his nose, but I can see the blood dripping on his face. It's coming down the side of my head. Like, uh-oh. Then I pivot off for an arm bar. One of my feet gets stuck underneath him as I did it. So now he rolls up on top. Like, okay, well, now he's on top of me. Now he's gushing all over me. He's running down my leg, hit me on the face, and I got to get this arm. I got it locked up. I got to make this thing happen, because who knows, man. The doctor comes in. He goes, nah, fight's over. So I figured this was my one and only shot to get this guy out of here, and caught in on his elbow, got to his wrist, started stretching it out. He wanted to try and fight and punch out of it, but I had that thing locked up tight, and he angled his elbow, but it didn't do him any good, because it was still bent, and I was still levering against it kind of sideways instead of straight on. And it just felt like a wet towel ripping. And then eventually he falls over in this massively dramatic way, which is kind of cool, and he's tapping
like
out.
Like a giant tumbling over.
Yeah, no, it was the best sell I could have got. Yeah.
You mentioned Billy Robinson and Ketch and Carl Gotch, who used to be Mr. Briscoe's neighbor down in Florida, by the way. Did you ever?
Was that when Carl was living in the small apartment after his wife?
He lived at the lake house out
okay.
Here north
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the neighbors. I asked you about the screaming coming out, right, Jerry?
Oh yeah. I had it's a lake neighborhood out there. So we were at a civic meeting, and one of the guys come up to me. I think he was an attorney. He said, I don't know. I live next door to this guy, Carl Gotch. You know Carl? I said, yeah, I know Carl. He's kind of strange. He said, strange, didn't he? He said, I got to ask you a question, though, Briscoe. He said, my wife and I are sitting there watching TV. He said, he always has a crew of Japanese kids out there. And he said, sometimes late at night, I hear those kids screaming out there like he's torturing them. What the hell is he doing? I said, he's torturing them, but he's not torturing them in a way that you might think he's torturing them. He's wrestling them. He's doing what? I said, he's wrestling. He said, I've been tempted to call the cops several times. And he said, but I've talked to Carl, and he's such a nice guy. So I know he's not a bad guy, but I just had to know from my mind, what the hell is he doing to those kids out there? Yeah, he had the neighbors scared to death.
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, maybe he needed a basement like the Heart Dungeon, so you could hide all that.
But he had a detached garage where he had the bags hanging and all that stuff. And
I know it.
Neighbors could get a peek of it, but they never went inside.
Yeah, I'd seen there's videos of the old Pancras guys, or when they were in New Japan. Didn't matter, you know. But the Japanese kids going and training under Carl, and I've seen the videos, and that was how I got introduced to swinging the mace and all that kind of stuff. But I remember all that footage pretty fondly. You know, I didn't get the pleasure of getting the crap stretched out of me by Carl. In fact, for me, it was more along the lines of Carl approaching me like, okay, this nice enough, whatever, you know, but who is this guy? Is he full of himself? Is he an asshole? Is he this? You know, how, you know, what's his attitude towards things?
A little bit of the above on all of them.
Yeah, well, anyway, so I'm here with this Japanese press crew. They show him a fight of mine. It was a pretty big deal. Beat their former champ and all this stuff. And Carl is watching it, and they wanted him to watch it and give his opinion. Well, it's Carl, so he's like, "Why are you on your back? You know, why are you in the horse position?" And you know, this different stuff. And I'm just like, "Okay." He's like, "Well, that was shit. You shouldn't have done that." And he's going over, and the Japanese press is just like, they're just, and we did not think it was going to go like this. I'm listening and watching. And I remember they get done, and it's just quiet. Like everybody, well, the people around are just like beside, they just don't even know what to think. And Carl, he just looks at me, and that kind of wry grin, that little look, and he goes, "So what I say, that piss you off?" And I looked at him and I go, "No, that didn't make me mad. It didn't piss me off at all. I'm here to learn what you have to say about things, not to come here with the way I already think about stuff. And if whatever you have to say, however it's said, if that's the thing that's going to make me that much better, then I'm here for it. You know, I'm not here to tell you anything. I'm here to listen." And he just kind of shook his head. "Oh, all right." And then it wasn't long after that where he's teaching. He's like, you know how to do push-ups? So he brings out the board, and I show him my Hindu push-ups, and I show him this, and he's giving me, "Okay, but I want you to do this on it." And then it's, you know, "How do you know clock head scissor?" "Oh yeah, I love clock head scissor. Show it to me." And I demo it on one of the guys there, and then he goes, "Okay, I want you to do this instead. And this is," and now Carl's like, "All right, this guy ain't a piece of shit. He's all right," you know. And I got to train with him a little bit, and we would talk on the phone. I still have drills and warm-ups and stuff that he gave me that I wrote down, and I still use. I still put people through, and you know, I wish I had spent more time with him before he passed, but you know, I guess isn't that kind of always the case? Like, I got to spend years under Billy Robinson, but I still wish I had more.
Yeah. I we're calling Carl before we go to Billy. Billy is a good friend of mine too, but I helped coach a high school wrestling team down the street from where both Carl and I live. So one day, I always brought guys in for like Kurt Angles, Brock Lesnar, Sheldon Benjamin, Charlie Haas's, and Jake Hager's, all the guys at wrestling college. That was their kind of payback to me for helping them get in the business. They had to come down and put on a clinic for me. So I started thinking one day, you know, Gosh lives right down the street. He's unique in his styles and everything. I'm gonna ask him. I've never been more terrified after I asked a guy to come in and teach my kids how to do something. I go home that night after, "Bristol, what'd you get yourself into?" And so the next day I call Carl, and I'm gonna pick him up, and I said, "Carl, okay, I'm gonna come down, but please don't hurt anybody." He said, "No, I'm just," but I was worried that entire workout. But he came in, he brought his bag of tools with him, you know, the boards and all that stuff. And with some of the stuff, the exercises, the stretching, some of them, the coach is still the same coach. He still incorporates a lot of that into today's workout. And I'll always be appreciative of Carl for coming down. And I never seen Carl smile so much in all of his life, helping these 15, 16, 17-year-old kid, you know, achieve a lot of stuff. But yeah. I'll forever hold that, be grateful for him doing that.
Yeah, Carl was a great man. And I know people like to think of him as a curmudgeon and, you know, difficult, but he just had zero tolerance for BS. He just hated it. And
well, that's one thing he told me too. He said, as long as they're attentive and they're trying to learn, he said, I'm not going to say anything to them. But if I get a guy in there that's kind of not paying attention, he said, I will discipline. I said, you have my permission to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's you get hit with the cane with Billy. If that was the case, he smacked you with the cane.
Well, tell us a little bit about your experience with Billy. How did you get hooked up with Billy?
You know, I was over in Japan. I was pretty much living there most of the time. And
Was that when you're fighting for Pancras?
uh, yes, well, I was still doing shoots while doing tours with New Japan Pro Wrestling, and I would train on the road. I would, if we were doing arenas, I'd run the steps of every place, run the steps of every arena, do sprints. I'd do Greco stuff with Nagata. I'd train with Nakanishi on wrestling and whoever else I get. Toru Yano, who is like a multiple time university heavyweight wrestling champ. I'd do some shoot stuff with like guys like Nagai and these other shoot guys that came from Rings or Pancrase that were working. Like the Makai Club had a lot of shooter guys in it. And I'd get all my workouts in, and then I'd have a couple weeks or 2 or 3 weeks after tour was over. So I'd train, do tour, train on tour. Then afterwards, I'd train with like Kosaka at his gym, and then Tayama, the referee at New Japan at the time, he goes, "Hey, well, Billy Robinson's down here at the Snake Pit." And I'd been to the Snake Pit before to see Miyato-san. And he goes, "Well, Billy wasn't there at the time. I'd been coming over." So then he was back and living in Japan. So I went over there, and, first thing Billy just basically wanted to do was see what I was about. So he had me wrestling his guys, and he's like, "All right, this kid's cool." And I just would just keep coming and training, showing up to work under Billy. And his kid Hideki Suzuki, who is now a really great worker in Japan right now, he had me wrestle him in a shoot just to see where Suzuki was at and to see how I deal with it. And then I started working with. I still train Hideki Suzuki whenever I get a chance. He's a great hand killer. He's a great guy, great worker. But it just became Billy was just a coach. I was there day in and day out, taking everything that he was willing to give me and help me with. And he realized that I was a guy that already had a fully developed style of fighting and wrestling and submission holds. He's just adding tweaks, changing little things, and sometimes one little adaptation made what I was doing that much greater, that stronger than I had ever considered, or ways about thinking about stuff. So it was, you don't realize what you got until it's gone. And I was always incredibly thankful and felt lucky and privileged to be able to say that Billy Robinson was my coach. But now that I'm working and promoting and building guys up, and part of me is like, I wish, I don't have Billy around to see this, to help with that, and to be a part of it. And it's in that way, it makes me pretty sad. But I also have a belief that as long as when I'm out there doing these things, and whether I'm working in the ring or I'm teaching people or I'm running a promotion and I'm booking and putting these things together, Billy's helping me. Inoki's helping me. They're all there because they put their effort into me, and I carry it with them. So what I do because of their influence. So they don't ever disappear. So when you're watching Bloodsport, to small and great ways, you're seeing Billy Robinson, Carl Gotch, and Antonio Inoki being expressed in there in one way or another.
Sometimes great athletes are not great coaches. I don't know if Michael Jordan would have been a great coach or not. He's great at everything else he's done, but you don't know, because just because they're good at the sport does not mean they can articulate what their greatness is to other people. Billy and Carl and Antonio Inoki, three of the greatest of all time. And you're talking about the greatest shooters, and everybody talks about Gotch and Robinson, the famous Wigan Snake Pit. How were they as coaches? Were they able to articulate what their knowledge base was to you and be able to make it simple enough? Sometimes making trigonometry into simple math is an art that a lot of people don't have.
Yeah, coaching is an art form. And there are people that are great coaches. There are people that are great athletes. And on rarity, you got one that's both. I thought they were phenomenal coaches. And maybe that's due to my own disposition and my own already established skill set. So when they would show me something, I already either knew it or knew a version of it. But the other thing is that I think what convinced or maybe made Carl believe I was worth working with was I wasn't there to try and be like, well, I do it this way, or to ask like 10,000 questions before I've even been working with this hold long enough to ask the best question that would be worth his time in the first place. So I just opened myself up to him. Hey, teach me. And I think that attitude is why I was lucky enough to not just have. I mean, look, how many times have you guys taken somebody? You see a kid, see someone, he's green, and you go to help him out a little bit, but the attitude maybe ain't quite right, or something, and then you're like, yeah, I helped you once.
Right.
There's not a second, a third, right? And maybe to them, they don't even register that has happened, and they don't think, oh, what's up with that? They say, oh, maybe he just forgot or got. They don't ever think that maybe it was me that caused it to be one interaction and not 10. And I feel like maybe having the right attitude is why a Chono would keep working with me and keep work with me, and stuff like, I'm a 24-year-old kid in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and at times I'd have someone like Chono going, hey, we're going to get into this exchange on the floor. What would you do? And I'm teaching these guys. It's just like, that's blowing my mind. I'm teaching you something. Like you're the man. Right. I'm just some kid here. Or Liger and I used to grapple on the regular, and I was coaching Liger in catch wrestling, and he knew catch, and he was doing jiu-jitsu at the time, but he's letting me teach him while he's teaching me how to be a worker, how to sell better, and how to different approaches in the ring. From Jushin Thunder Liger, this guy I'm watching as a kid and being like, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen, And this incredible workers are like, oh yeah, hey, come here, kid, let me show you something. Like, okay, yeah, I got time. I got all the time you want. Anytime you will give me, it's yours. Whatever I had planned, it's off the books. It's yours now. And coaching is really about attitudes first. And which is why I take I take on the guys I do, and I don't the ones that I don't, because like a guy I work with right now, Royce Isaacs. I met him at a show doing this like street fight match, and I just remember there wasn't a ton of hokey bullshit. It seemed really straight to the point. It's kind of difficult to work around these places when there's no padding, there's no ropes. They're going to blast somebody through a door and all this stuff in a warehouse. But by the end of it, I was like, oh, I believe this. This was good. And then he comes up to me and starts, wants to have a conversation, but he's not asking for anything from me. He's just being a genuine person. And so I remembered that. And when I got time to be able to bring this guy into Bloodsport and work with him, okay, great. You got my time, and you'll always be able to have it because you got the right attitude.
Did you ever, because you got thrown into the water with some incredible legends at a pretty young age without a lot of, leading up to it, without going to the territories and all that stuff. Were you ever overwhelmed? The reason I asked that is, I grew up watching the Von Erichs in Texas. And the first time I remember sitting across from the ring from Kevin, I remember just sitting there thinking like, oh my God, I remember watching this guy when I was my grandfather, and I was overwhelmed. I don't know if it happened later or not, but that day I remember that distinctly, that I'm sitting there thinking, this is my idol. Did you ever, you faced Couture in that UFC championship. Was any of that ever, when you looked at it, when you stood in the ring, thought, wow, this is kind of cool?
Yes and no. In terms of working, there was plenty of times where, okay, we've done all this, we've done all that, done all this, and then it's like, now I'm going to get in the back and walk into the ring, and I'm just like, okay, I'm in the corner. Well, shit, don't fuck up. Like, oh, look at who I'm in the ring with right
number
now.
One.
That was my thought too.
Yeah, I was just like, oh God, these guys are so good. Hell, being teamed with Perry Saturn, I remember him and Cronus as the Eliminators. I was just like, oh, you got Perry Saturn as your tag mate? Jesus,
Perry was great.
Yeah, he was incredible. Perry was at. I added. Perry would ask me to teach him things on the road, and I'm just like, okay, yeah. I mean, whatever you want, dude. I mean, you're Perry Saturn. You could ask for ice cream, cigarettes, or wrestling holds. You're getting all of them. So, in that sense, always. But I'd have to try and make sure to compartmentalize, because I'm still there as my own self, right? And they see me in a way of having somewhat of a peership with them. So I got to deliver in terms of how they see what's possible of me and what this company thinks I'm capable of doing. And I want to do my best. And when it came to shooting, I'd be aware of it. I remember watching Randy Couture, and he's from Washington State as well. Beat Vitor Belfort and cheering him on, watching fight Maurice Smith, two Washington guys fighting each other, and then actually training with him because he was coming and training under Maurice Smith on striking and different things like that. He'd drive up from Portland, and being a guy in there and wrestling and grappling with him and training as he had these fights against Pedro Hizzo and some other guys when he was champ. And then, I got my opportunity to fight Randy on like 6 weeks notice. And I was coming off of arthroscopic knee surgery, and I guess all their other, what they thought were better choices weren't available. So when they went down that list, they gave me a ring, and I said, yeah, I'll do it. I got this. But in shooting, when it comes to I'm aware of it. I can definitely think about it after the fact, but when it comes to shooting, I'm just out there to destroy. That's it. I'm going to train as hard as I can, and I'm going to break this guy into a million pieces. And I want to put a hurting on somebody bad enough that they don't want to try it twice. And I guess maybe the first real experience of this was fighting Dan Severn, who was a huge idol of mine watching in UFC. And, he's repping pro wrestling and suplexing guys. And then there I am in the ring with him and armbarring him at the end of it. And, it's like, yeah, but my thought was he had beaten two teammates of mine. So I'm like, I'm getting revenge. But then, not long after all this, I'm just like, you just fought one of your idols and you beat him. That's nuts. And there ain't ever going to be a day I did Dan and Don's podcast and, Dan Severn, man, I fought Dan Severn. That's crazy. It's never not going to be something cool as hell that I did, or the relationship I have with Don, working him in the ring. And there's a big long story that goes with it. I'll save for another one. But my dad saying, I'm telling Dan, oh yeah, Don's left shoulder's kind of banged up real bad, so you need me to work around it. And you better not hurt Don Fry. I'm like, Dad, I'm not going to hurt Don. I wouldn't dare.
Possible.
Yeah, trust me, I will take care of Don Fry. Don't you worry about it. I got Don's back. And
is that not just the biggest alpha male ever? Is Don Fry?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean that mustache alone. I think it'd take a whole crowd of people to take it down. Yeah.
What do you consider yourself? Most guys consider themselves either strikers, grapplers, catch. What do you consider yourself when your core tenet?
My strength is grappling, catch as catch can. That's what I am. I'm a wrestler, but I guess ultimately I'm just a fighter. If it takes hitting you, headbutting you, suplexing you, elbows, kicks. I've trained in so many varieties of martial arts, and I've been doing striking stuff for such a long time. And later in my career, one of my sparring partners, and I was a part of sparring as camps with them, was Prince Charles Martin, who's been ranked up in the tops of the heavyweight rankings, and another guy, Joe Hanks. These guys are full on, they were all top 20 American heavyweights in the world, and we're all sparring partners with each other. And that's not me just getting the crap kicked out of me, wrestler versus boxer. This is me boxing with these guys and holding my own and being a worthy guy to go out there and spar with them, to help them get prepared for their stuff, and vice versa for me. And I've done bare knuckle boxing before. I beat a guy.
I want to ask you about that. How was the bare knuckle boxing?
It was a rush. It was so awesome. It felt like what MMA was when I first did it, and we were calling it no holds barred. That's what it felt like again, where you just travel somewhere. There's some heater over here, some ringer, and it's like, all right, that's your ringer. Well, I'm the ringer from my country, so let's go at it and seeing what happens. It feels like, like the movie Bloodsport or a video game, Street Fighter 2, some shit like that. It's adventure, and I absolutely loved it. It must have been what it was like doing territory stuff way back in the day, or like listening to the old stories from Roddy, Roddy Piper, and him going around and being like, oh yeah, these guys, just tearing me up and beating me up. And that story he tells of getting broke in a little bit, and then he gets an offer to go wrestle, I think in Missouri or somewhere. He's like, oh yeah, oh, that sounds great. I hope it's anybody but Larry the Axe Hennig again. And sure enough, it's Larry the Axe Hennig, you know. Or you know, I was lucky enough, I got to know Piper a little bit. Great guy, tons of stories.
Great guy.
Yeah, and
one of my best friends.
Hey, I mean, but Mr. Brisco said when Vince got Roddy Piper, that's when he knew that they were going to sell Georgia Championship Wrestling. He was that big of a draw. Roddy was that.
Oh, wow.
Huge.
And that big of influence in the NWA. That was our tipping point right there. I mean, Sarge had left. Hogan, of course, had left many years. Valentine had left. But when they got Hot Rod, my brother and I, that's it, man. We're doomed for defeat now. They got our meal ticket, and they did, you know. And it was time. But I want to get in your camps and your clinics are iconic, Josh. And how did they come about? I mean, you know, the guys that have come out of there are just spectacular. And I have a friend, Tadaki Hata, one of my old teammates from Oklahoma State. He's been involved, I think, in a couple of them somewhere around the West Coast there. But I just. He sent me a T-shirt, and I still got my Barnett T-shirt too, by the way, and I wear it proudly. But tell us a little bit about your camp and what's involved in them.
Well, I mean, I'll structure something where if you want to just learn catch, I'll teach you that. If you want to work on full MMA stuff or a particular part of striking, I mean, it can be tailored to what you think is necessary. But I think the biggest premise behind it really is that I have been fortunate to know people that have invested in me, not just what you could say is just their knowledge. It's the knowledge that was given to them, and the knowledge that was given to the person that gave it to them. And there's this whole, you know, if Carl or Billy was teaching me something, this goes all the way back to Billy Wicks, Billy Riley, you know, or if I'm on a phone call with old Pops Wicks, and he's talking about the way he likes to grab up a double wrist lock, or you know, it seems small to some people, but it's big to me. And it's
one
big.
Of my first matches in pros with Billy Wicks. I learned so much.
Pops is a great man too, and I want to take these things that I've been fortunate enough to have brought to me, given to me, and try to keep them alive in the world and put it out there. And by doing so, I feel like I'm not just teaching people necessarily just moves. I mean, that's a part of it, but in these interactions, I'm going to bring up where it came from, how it came about that I learned this, or where I used it, and maybe who gave it to me, who was even better with it than I was. And if you can find anything on them, you know, go watch it or go check this person out and bring those names back to life and bring what comes with it, the approach, right? And if you're a snake pit guy, you're going to be different from like a Farmer Burns guy. You're going to be different from the Kodokan, which was back then when Ad Santel was going over and fighting those guys. It's all going to be a little different, but one of these is going to be something for you. And I just want that in the world, that the world has such a short memory these days. You know, I remember watching boxing in the 80s and 90s, and we would still reference back to people, not just the commentators, but the fans too, would reference back to people from the 70s and 60s and even older at times. You know, it wouldn't be a surprise to hear Sugar Ray Robinson's name brought up, or Carmen Basilio, or any of these old greats, or even, you know, go back to John L. Sullivan, or you know, any number of guys. Nowadays, it feels like people don't remember anything that's even 2 years old now.
Right.
And, you know, I'm not telling people how they have to approach any of this stuff. I just think like it's a travesty. And I feel like there's a lot more that they could have out of these experiences if they just had that, you know. I feel like it could be better for them.
It really sounds to me like, Josh, you look at the kid and you see what's best for him and what his mindset is, and then tailor his clinic and his camp regimen
right
toward them. Yeah.
I don't want you to be a robot. If it takes me telling you what to do for everything, well, then you're not operating on your own, you know, your own instincts, your own ability. I can't be there all the time. I want to build that person up with the best foundation I can give them, and then allow them to use that to do everything else. And so, I'll get kids and marks and fans, whatever, saying, oh, well, I can't believe that you actually think X wrestler is good because they do, a lot of aerial stuff, or you think, this guy, one of your guys did this or that. I didn't think it's like, no. It's not about the moves. It's about, why are you doing them? How are you doing them? And what's the point? And who are you to do it? Why would you? I'm not going to go out there and hit a moonsault. If I could, I'm not going to do it. Why? The only time you might would have ever seen some shit like that is just because I wanted to pull it off on a house show for fun. But it's not, that's not really who I am.
Just see if you could do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just, because look, man, we're out there on the road. We all know we like to pop the boys and have a little fun on our own sake. But I'm not a guy who uses a lariat very much, but I taught myself to throw a lariat by watching all the people who I thought had good lariats, and then going to a heavy bag and trying to hit a heavy bag with a lariat like I really wanted to hurt somebody, and then dialing it back from there. And figuring out, how do I impart that violence of really trying to decapitate someone with a lariat, but do it in a way that can be snug and proper, but not kill nobody. And if they do get killed by a lariat, it's because they didn't pay attention. That's the other thing. I don't throw my arm up for you to duck under it. I throw it right where your head is, because you need to duck it so that people realize that I missed. Not, you think people can't see you doing the damn 100 freestyle out there when you whip that arm up, but every other time you throw it dead at them? You think they don't notice that? They're not that dumb. So I'm not going to treat them like they're dumb, but I'm also not going to treat you like you're incapable of wrestling with me. So if you don't duck, you got hammed right in the face with an arm because of yourself. Right. Not me. It's not my fault. Well, that was real stiff. Well, you're not supposed to get hit with it, dummy. Which is, again, why is it stiff? We're not supposed to get hit with it, which means you weren't ready to bump either. So, well, of course you're going to get wrecked.
Yeah, George Steele was who's good friends with Jerry and me, agent of the WWE, George Animal Steele. He asked me one time a question. I was just a young kid in WWE for my first year there, and he goes, "Why do we always do it that way?" And I was sitting there, and I thought the answer is obvious to me, but I'm not going to say it because I'm a young kid. I'm not
right. We're afraid of screwing up too. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. And thank God Shawn Michaels was sitting close to me. Shawn goes, "'Cause it works." I said, "Thank you." I didn't say thank you, but that's the answer. Sometimes we overthink stuff. Sometimes if it's always worked, it still works. You don't have to reinvent the wheel sometimes. Sometimes doing the things that matter really still matter.
Yeah, of course. And look, if you can be on that page where you're going to throw a lariat and you want that guy to go under it, and because you want the effect of, it's dangerous, he's got to avoid it, he can't be anywhere near it, otherwise he really threatens losing this match or going unconscious. It's just not possible, let alone if it's JBL's lariat or it's Stan Hansen's lariat, like, oh no, man, this is a match ender, so I better not get caught with it. Well, hell, you can also set it up so you can get a bigger sell out of the miss, where you come in with that lariat, you come so hard, you lose your balance a little bit. Well, that looks like, oh, well, there ain't no faking that. Oh boy.
Stan Hansen would do a whole match where he'd start just pulling up this elbow sleeve. He'd go to pull it up, and the Japanese crowd would just go crazy. And all he would do is just slowly start pulling it up. And then finally he ends up either hitting it or not hitting it. But the whole match was that anticipation, like Hitchcock used to do, of the bomb underneath the table. When is it going to go off? Yeah.
And simple ways of approaching this stuff like that. That's where you get that maximum effect out of it. And, just something with missing a lariat. This is also why I tell people, everyone I work with, I go, if you want to be a worker, you got to watch Antonio Inoki versus Billy Robinson, 60-minute, 2 out of 3 falls. And you watch this and you come back and you tell me what you see, because what I want them to notice is, at any time these guys are trying to hit their finisher, that's like, they're not waiting, oh, here's a move they hit in the go home, and then you're just giving it all away at that point. If all of a sudden, whenever you can, boom, you go after, try to get your thing, and they react like, oh, I absolutely better not let Billy Robinson get this double underhook on me, this butterfly. I got to get my foot to the rope. I got to do this. I got to sag to the floor. When you show the threat of what's happening, now nobody needs to know wrestling. They just know if they see this, this is important. This has meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Josh, we can't thank enough of your time, but you told me in a text last night you wanted to ask me about Mauro Ranella, who's a good friend of yours.
Yes, indeed. And
go ahead.
Yeah, and I just remember at the time it just being a thing that was out there, and the distress that it was causing Mauro. And he's my old broadcast partner. Hell, he was calling me in Pride. He's been a part of the little adventure that is Josh Barnett for a good portion of it. And we were we've always been really close. So it just really was like, okay, well, there's no way I could go on here without
and I understand.
without asking about it. Yeah,
I certainly don't mind answering, because I've never really told my side of the story, because I just didn't want to escalate the story by, even when you tell your side, whether it makes sense or not, you escalate the story. And I just wanted the whole thing to go away. But the main thing that happened with Mauro was that show called Bring It to the Table. It was a show that they did on WWE Network. And there was a poll that was on it. So we did this show. We're doing it in Orlando. And right before the end of the show, I used to go and do a rant every time on this show, some type of rant about something, kind of like Stephen A. Smith does on ESPN, things like that. So they said, hey, we need a rant for you to do. I said, okay, well, what do you got? And they said, they looked around, they couldn't find something. They said, hey, Mauro just retweeted a poll that he was in, that he was the #1 announcer. And I said, okay, I'll do a rant on that. And so I did the rant on the poll. I'd never heard of that poll before. People tell this, came to this post fact, said, oh, John must have been really jealous about that poll because I wasn't the announcer. I don't look at much for stuff on the internet anyway, because most of it about me is negative. So I don't really read much of it. So I'd never seen the poll. I just ran on this poll. And after it aired, they told me, they said, hey, Meltzer said something about you. And I said, why would he say something about me? He said, well, that was his poll. That's how little I knew about the poll. Now, Mauro saw that. I just assumed that Mauro knew that was a working rant about this whole thing, that it was done in a working context. In hindsight, which is always 2020, somebody should have smartened Mauro up about that. Because, I think when Mauro heard it, when you hear it through the grapevine, it sounds much worse than it is. But there was zero malice behind that. I mean, absolutely none. It was just simply, I'd heard about that poll a couple minutes before the segment. They said, do a rant on it. I said, okay, I did a rant on it. I thought, no big deal. This will be something fun to talk about on commentary, because now Mauro can say he's the #1 announcer. And, the JBL character can be jealous that I'm not the #1 announcer. We thought we'd have fun with it. Well, it turned out that Mauro, I think, took it. I'm not going to speak for him. I think that he took it the wrong way, because that was certainly a point of contention later. So I felt terrible that somebody didn't smarten up Mauro to that. Last time I saw Mauro, I think he was working for NXT. I think we were down in New Orleans, and he was across the street, and it was just me walking back from something. He was standing there waiting on a car, and I walked across the street and just shook his hand. I hadn't seen him since all of this. I said, hey, how you doing, Mauro? Good to see you. And he said, good to see you, man, and just walked off. There's zero animosity for me toward Mauro, and anything that was done, in my opinion, was always done in a working context. So when Mauro issued the statement that I was not the reason that he left WWE, I had no idea what the reason was. I wasn't involved in it. So,
well, and at that point, people, you could see would say, oh, well, that's just what he's going to say, to be political about it, or to, he's going to hide that, when even if he's telling the truth. And the fact that you've come up to him and shook his hand and talked to him, I mean, that makes me feel a lot better. Not like I was, on here to get all hot about nothing, and which is also why I hit you up ahead of time, because it's like, no, don't drop something on someone's feet out of nowhere. Have respect for somebody, and if you got something that you want to really talk about in this manner, just talk to them about it ahead of time first. Give them a chance to give them a heads up and know, so that, because at the end of the day, it was just more about how it affected my friend potentially than anything else.
And I completely understand. I had no idea that would be taken as a legit rant. It was just something that came up on the fly. And in fact, there was some guy in WWE said, hey, we should have smartened up Mauro before that. And I said, I didn't even think about it, because to me, it was a working situation. Same as me being a heel commentator with him, with all working stuff. As far as I knew, I didn't have a bad relationship with Mauro. I don't know that. I can't speak for him. Only can speak for me.
Well, right. Yeah. And, look, it could be that day, it goes down bad. Any other day, it's seen the way you would hope it would be. And, regardless of of how it goes, if we always get a chance to go out there and at least meet that person again and say, oh, hey man, and just have a conversation. I had a guy who I still work with, in regards to MMA, and he was kind of sideways a little bit about something that he interpreted that I said, and I just got to sit down with him, and now we're really best buds because, if you really feel like there's a misunderstanding or something, just talk to a person, and if you can meet a person on their level,
unfortunately, Morrow, whatever reason, I can't remember, Morrow came back about it. I don't think we worked together after that, so there wasn't a point where I could tell Morrow, hey, I hope you know that was a work that I certainly meant nothing. I remember when I came back recently, I was doing some promo, and I told Dolph Ziggler before I walked out, I said, Dolph, I'm going to go out there and say a bunch of things I really don't mean. I want you to know that. But Morrow got me tickets one time to a UFC match in Vegas. He got me, I think it was Connor and Diaz.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah, really cool. That's a big one.
Oh, it's huge. Huge. He got me tickets. I was out in Vegas and I called him and I was going to pay for him. He got them for me and everything. It was
fantastic.
Terrific. I enjoyed.
Did you have a cowboy hat on?
I did. Absolutely. Yeah, I did. Absolutely. It was, I think that was one of the days Diaz won. So there was a bunch of drunk Irishmen afterwards that were not very happy about that outcome.
No, that'd be a hot night on the streets. That one, yeah.
So I hope that explains a little bit that at least there was not malice involved with me. It was something that, in my opinion, was a
well, look, if you and him are good, then I'm good. That's at the end of the day. It's I'm not here to be somebody's arbiter on what they should and how they should and shouldn't feel about anything. It was just
nobody's your friend.
Yeah, no, of course.
Friend, and that's what friends do. Friends do ask what happened. That and I appreciate you giving me the heads up on it. That was really cool.
Well, like we've had some time to talk prior to this, and here on the podcast itself. So I hope that that however I describe who I am, people, I want them to really know that that's it. That's how I run my life.
Well, awesome. Well, Josh, hey, thank you so much for joining us. I've been looking forward to this since Mr. Brisco told me that we were going to have you on. I'm such a big fan of everything you're doing. There's so much more I want to ask you about, but
I could do this for hours, digging into asking you guys about not just the business, but all your amateur sports backgrounds, how your as a kid getting into oh man, I could just go into all of this. I love professional wrestling. I love fighting. And, my thought has always been pro wrestling and shooting and working is just two sides of the same coin. That's it. And that's the way I see it. I think one thing I think that pro wrestling has all over MMA, especially right now, is that elite pro wrestling still knows its history and its past. And it has this idea of the old supposed to bring up the young. And I hope that with what I do, it helps reinforce that. And that the people that work my shows, they take that to heart too. So wherever they're at, Impact, New York, WWE, AEW, I don't care where they end up in the world. They take that same principle and they do that and they pass it on. And they bring up new talent and new growth.
Yeah, Josh, I got one question. Thank you very much, but I got one question. What do you think of the merger of the WWE and UFC now? How do you feel about
it? There is definitely something that can be done there. I just don't know that there's that person that can fully integrate or make use of it outside of guys just showing up at each other's events in the crowds, which that's good. I mean, it is publicity in and of itself for each individual promotion, but how do you really capitalize on that? I think on one end, maybe the intention is just that people think of them as being in the same market, so to speak, and so they can do things like have each other's athletes show up at stuff or have people make guest appearances to talk about or be on camera but really it's really just about a portfolio around investment instead of anything else. But being a guy that does both and sees it both as being really part of the same system, Yeah, I'd like to see how that could be better exploited for the athletes and for the promotions themselves. But the one trouble is, if you got a bunch of shooters over there, you don't necessarily want them coming over and just outright jobbing to guys on the other side, or even maybe the WWE is like, well, we just can't be putting all these dudes over. I mean, how long do we even get to have them? What are we going to do with them? What does that do for our guy that's putting the guy over? I mean, is there a way that this can build them up? And I'm a big believer in, look, going up or going down is its own thing, but either way, it needs to make everybody. It needs to make sense. It needs to have a reason. And the best of both worlds is the guy who loses needs to be seen as better and stronger than he was when he got in the ring, just as much as the guy that wins needs to be seen elevated. Everybody needs to make money off it. Everybody needs to grow from it. Everybody needs to get something out of it. That's the way it works. So I don't know how that could go. And taking guys. Oh, go ahead.
Do you see many Ronda Rouseys or Brock Lesnar doing both, or what?
I don't know. I think most fighters are going to see it as something they do at the end of their career or when it's over, not something that they do while they're still mixed in with what they're doing. And I think the UFC would probably feel like, even if there was a potential for somebody to maybe break through and be, well, I mean, this would be an insane, but be a Kurt Angle. Okay. But the UFC is going to think, well, WWE's getting that out of them. We're not getting that, right? Like, maybe we can get a little cut out of it. Maybe they have some monetary side that's what's worked for both. But, and then what if that guy gets hurt doing WWE and now we don't get to use him for UFC? And so everybody's going to want to protect their assets, just the same as they're not going to send Bobby Lashley over in a heavyweight fight from WWE to UFC. They're not going to do that because they're like, well, no, we got all this in store for Bobby. And what if Bobby loses the fight? How do we, what do we do with all this? And so it ain't easy, but maybe something can come of it. But I don't necessarily see that crossover stuff happening too much, or at least not to that level.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate your time today, Josh.
It's my pleasure to sit down with some greats like yourselves and who've been out there day in and day out and some of the biggest and most important matches and rings and being a part of all the way from being a worker to being in office and production and commentary booths and development. It's just, pro wrestling's my love. So, anytime.
Thanks, Josh.